All right, welcome to the Young Turks. I feel that this week is going to be enormously active. And now you think like, well, that's the worst prediction you've ever made.
Active in like what way?
Yeah.
Like stress levels? I feel it. I feel it active. I feel real active right now.
No, I mean news-wise. And I think that, well, the Trump era isn't every week insanity defined? Yes, in fact, we have stories about that in today's program. But I feel something in the air about this week being particularly insane. So let's see what happens. Buckle up. Everybody brace for impact.
Well, I want to start off with some good news because there's quite a bit of good news today.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
No. You want to talk about shakeups. Okay, we got great news. And we will get to Trump's insanity. There's a tornado of insanity or a hurricane of insanity that we're going to get to.
Yes.
But I also want to let you know that Anna is going to be on Cuomo tonight. So that's at 9 o'clock Eastern, and it's going to be progressives versus moderates because of the story we're about to tell you, which is awesome. Anyway, but make sure you watch and see Anna at 9 o'clock tonight to see Anna. All right, let's do it.
A major poll indicates that both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are now leading in the Democratic primary. Now, this is a Monmouth University poll that shows that they are beating Joe Biden, who has been the front runner, and they're beating him by 1 point. The Monmouth University poll released Monday shows Sanders and Warren deadlocked among Democratic voters at 20%, with Biden a point behind at 19%. No other candidate cracks double digits. That includes Kamala Harris, who's in fourth place at 8%.
All right, you guys ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Biden. Okay, I'm just kidding.
Okay, one of the worst mistakes anyone can make is to get too confident, and I don't want people to get confident. With that said, this is great news because there are giant changes in the poll results for these candidates. So if you just go back a little bit, the same polling organization found something very different just last month.
Hold on. So before we show you the massive changes that have come forward, I want to tell you two things we're going to do afterwards. One, Nate Silver has decided this poll doesn't count. Hilarious. Okay. By the way, if you don't know Washington, you'd think like, oh my God, that sounds so preposterous, right? He's kidding or something, right? No. Everybody in Washington, there's already been a couple of polls showing Elizabeth Warren making huge strides, Biden falling back a lot. The other polls had Sanders rising a little bit or staying even. Now this poll shows him rising as well. They literally don't believe any of those polls. I know people talking to them internally where people in Washington are like, no, that obviously isn't true. Because I know, all my friends say it isn't true. So Americans are wrong, okay? So they actually believe this stuff. Now we're gonna show you the massive movements, and afterwards I'm gonna show you a fun told you clip. That's always hilarious, okay? Right, but I do wanna say before we get too far removed from my down goes Biden joke, largely joke, but it's on its way, is that, look, in all seriousness, this poll is a statistical tie. So you shouldn't say things are statistical ties only when it's to your advantage. And a lot of the headlines do say tie. Now, not all of them said tie when Biden was up by a point, which happened recently, but overall, a lot of them did say tie, etc. And this poll does have a 5.7% margin of error, which is significant.
Yes.
So look at the overall movements. So don't be like Nate Silver and not look at the overall movement and go, I don't see it, right? His new excuses. Oh, no, it has to be after a major event, otherwise the poll doesn't count.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna get to him in just a second.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, just to finish up on that. So, but it definitely does count. At the same time, it's of course not the end all and be all. It's one poll. It is going along with the rest of the polls showing similar movements, but it doesn't mean that they've taken the lead for good. We'll talk more about that in a second.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that the biggest takeaway from this poll is that the very same polling organization in late June found very different numbers for the progressive candidates. So let me give you the past numbers. And again, this is the poll from June. Compared with the Monmouth University poll in June, Sanders has ticked up 6 points and Warren 5 points. Biden dropped 13 points from 32% in June. So he went from 32% to 19%. And we're comparing apples to apples. It's the same organization doing the polling. Also, Biden is down 14 points among white and non-white voters. He's down.
That would be everyone.
Yeah, I know. It's a really weird way of putting it.
No, it makes sense because they say his strength is white voters, but sometimes they'll turn around and say his strength is African American voters in places like South Carolina, and he's down with both across the board. So there's nowhere to hide. He's lost in almost every category, as Anna will continue to explain.
Exactly. So he's down 14 points among white and non-white voters. He's also down 14 points among men, 13 points among women. He's down 15 points among voters younger than 50 years old, which doesn't surprise me, and 9% among voters 50 and older. So across the board, Biden has seen a decrease in his poll numbers. And it is fascinating to hear some of the moderates in the media try to dismiss this type of polling. And just going back to Nate Silver, I do want to read you his tweet in response to this because it was just fascinating. He says, let's go to graphic 6. The advanced skill in polling analysis most people miss is that you should be much more inclined to believe there's been a significant shift in the polls after big news or campaign events, example, debates, and much less inclined to do so when there hasn't been. So 2 things I want to just mention off the bat. First of all, there was a debate in June.
Yep.
I mean, did he forget about that? And secondly, there were other things sprinkled throughout the last poll and today's poll, and those things included Biden saying all sorts of nonsensical, crazy statements. One of the latest ones that we haven't covered on this show yet, he gave a speech where he talked about what would it have been like if Obama had been assassinated? Like, he has these weird moments that I think are really starting to hurt him politically.
No, I mean, look, I'm worried about Biden, and I don't mean that in like a fake kind of way, like I'm concerned about him. Let's now, talk about how his mental state and bury him. No, I'm worried about him as a person. If he was the candidate, I'd be massively worried for the Democratic Party. I mean, look, he was just in New Hampshire, and he said, what a beautiful state Vermont is. Now, if that was the only slip up, you'd say, oh, that's no big deal at all, right? And I always remember the theorists, let's put them that way, that thought that Hillary Clinton had an aneurysm and had brain damage. And it was a lot of people on the right wing, but also some folks on the left wing, okay? And that was never true, and there was never any evidence of that. And faced with overwhelming evidence that her mental state is fine now, they still won't give in because some people lose their minds when it comes to politics and bias, etc. So with Biden, if it was just one data point, okay. But now, guys, he's done it over and over again with so-called gaffes, and the poor kids can be like white kids, and you've heard at least half a dozen significant ones. But on the Vermont, New Hampshire one, you're campaigning in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is one of the first 2 states. Confusing it with Vermont when you're that seasoned a politician, that is really weird. And so I give you that in the context of what Anna just said, which is, no, Nate, all of this has happened since the last debate. There's been 2 debates, and the polls moved after the second debate clearly in favor of Warren and Sanders, and more importantly against Biden. And then there was one poll that showed that no, Biden had regained the lead, and of course all the mainstream media is on Biden's side, so they do propaganda on his behalf 24/7 after the debates for several weeks. But then he kept making these huge gaps that are making big news. So there's plenty of reasons to believe this poll and 2 others that are similar to it are real. But when anyone in the establishment, including Nate Silver, sees numbers they don't like, they just wish them away. He did the same thing with Donald Trump right about this time. When I was saying, look, all the numbers are super real, he's gonna win the Republican nomination, people like Nate Silver were saying I was crazy. Oh, that's never gonna happen. No one I know likes Donald Trump. That doesn't mean a goddamn thing. And the reason I get more mad at Nate Silver is because his job is supposed to be numbers.
Right.
If he was a normal jackass pundit on television, I'd be like, it's Tuesday. Right, the American people say that millionaires should keep their tax cuts. That's what I heard among my millionaire friends, right? That's normal stuff. But Nate can't even see numbers straight.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not really surprised. I think that his commentary and his hostility toward progressive candidates is well documented. But I do want to get back to some of the other findings of this poll, and then I want to kind of give you my theory, and then Cenk can brag about his predictions.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that's what he's waiting for the most. So here are some more findings, and it's just fascinating. Biden also slipped 18 points among Democratic voters who describe themselves as moderate or conservative, and 9 points among self-identified liberals. Okay, let's pause for a second. Self-identified moderates stopped supporting Biden, according to the responses from this poll. And just quickly, I want to give you my theory. Look, Biden, yes, there have been a number of gaffes. He's also been MIA when it comes to, in my opinion, important campaign stops and rallies and in terms of like strategizing and garnering more support or solidifying more support in the Democratic base. He's been MIA, he's kind of ripping a page out of Hillary Clinton's playbook, which I think is a giant mistake. And then you have the progressive candidates, and what have they been doing? They've been making it rain with policy proposals, right? And they're robust, they're bold. I mean, Bernie Sanders with his Green New Deal proposal, actual legislation that came out last week, and it was wonderful, right? And so they're coming out strong. They're hitting Mitch McConnell where it hurts. We have a story in the rundown today where Bernie Sanders went to Kentucky and he called out Mitch McConnell for completely neglecting struggling coal workers. These are candidates who actually care about the issues, and they're not afraid to propose bold solutions to very real issues Americans are facing today. I think when you combine all these different elements, that is reflected in this poll. The response from Democratic voters is reflected in this poll, and it's great.
Yeah, so I want to clarify one thing and then brag. So this poll was conducted between August 16th and 20th, so they hadn't seen the Green New Deal proposal yet.
But there have been so many others.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But he did criminal justice reform proposal that was very bold. But it's one of many in a pattern. First, Elizabeth Warren had come out with a lot of proposals, and then Bernie now has doubled down in his number of proposals. And so now, if you're someone who's a progressive, you see those, or it's just any Democratic voter based on the numbers, you go, well, look, they're coming out with interesting ideas and look like they're fighting for me, and these are things that I agree with. If you're in the establishment, and I have to clarify this because both sides don't understand each other at all because they live in different bubbles. In the establishment, they look at those proposals especially by Bernie Sanders and go, oh, no one would care about those. Those are not big events. Because obviously those are unrealistic. Everyone in Washington says so. Obviously, we're not going to do those because that would hurt oil companies, et cetera. So, and Nate Silver doesn't have to think about oil companies. He just is part of the groupthink. And everyone in that toxic stew thinks there's no way that the American people would be interested in progressive ideas. Nate, look at the polling on every single issue. I mean, I've literally gone through dozens of issues that have been polled. The American people are 60% to 80% in favor of progressive issues. The number that keeps popping up in like half the polls is 66%, 66%. That's 2/3 of the country, okay? On massively progressive values and issues, et cetera. But when Warren and Sanders defend those, everyone in the establishment goes, oh, that's not a big deal, that can't be real. Now, finally, Warren has broken through a little bit and they get, oh, she has a plan for that. And so they've given her some positive coverage, but remember, Bernie's still in the race. Okay, so that finally leads me to what I told you guys recently. When the last set of polls came out showing that Warren was closing in on Biden big time and Biden was fading, here's what I said. The Biden fade has begun. So now we got a poll out of Iowa. I believe that's a fairly relevant state. It's starting line at Change Polls, and in we've got a new leader, Elizabeth Warren. In fact, Joe Biden's now tied with Bernie Sanders. So depending on how you want to frame it, he's tied for second, tied for third, and fading and fading. Warren now has an 11-point lead in Iowa against Biden. Now here's the thing, you can say, hey, that's just one poll, and you could talk about, hey, what is the credibility of that poll, et cetera. But guys, it doesn't really matter. Does anyone think that Joe Biden, after losing the lead, is going to retake the lead? No one that knows politics thinks that. Once the fade begins, it's good night, Irene. And here we are, nighty night. So maybe Nate and Joe Scarborough and everybody else in Washington thinks, no, Biden's an amazing politician and he'll mount a comeback. I'm here to tell you, and I've been proven right about 1,000 times over, that he will not make a comeback. He has no ability to make a political comeback. Once the fade begins, it's terminal, and it has already begun. So I told you that 10 days ago when the polling showed what we thought it was gonna show based on what we know about politics. And the reason why we do predictions, yes, it's fun, yes, I get a big head over it, but really the main reason is so you know that we're not full of it. We're not Monday morning quarterbacking it, we told you ahead of time. And part of the reason we do that is because everyone else in media says we're wrong. So I say, okay, great, why don't we do a test? I'll tell you ahead of time what's gonna happen, they can tell you ahead of time, and let's see who's right. And time again, we're shown to be right on this show.
Luckily, they give us credit after we're proven.
Oh yeah, every time. They've never once said, oh yeah, they were right, we were wrong. The most important part of that is we were wrong. Who cares about us being right? The phenomenon is what's important.
Yes.
And so even though we told them Hillary Clinton is very defeatable, I saw her lose with my own eyes in 2008. They're like, no, she can't be beat. No way, Trump has no chance, no chance. And okay, that's the past. Have you learned anything? No, haven't learned anything. All of Washington. And right now they're like, Sanders has no chance of winning. Warren, I don't know, maybe, but come on, really. A progressive, I mean, none of her ideas are gonna get implemented. Maybe it'll be cute that she'll win, but we're not gonna do any of those goddamn things. And they really can't see that they're biased. So one last one for you guys today then. Look, I think there's an excellent chance that Biden doesn't even make it to Iowa. He's not even in the race when the voting begins. Because if this fade continues, we're in August. He's gasping for air. He ain't gonna make it to January. So you think he's gonna wanna get humiliated, come in 3rd, 5th, 7th? No, there's an excellent chance he leaves the race before we have a single vote. Now on the other end, Donald Trump is a certifiable lunatic. And he keeps saying things that are crazier and crazier every single day. So I still believe, I've said this from day one, and I still believe today, there's also a very good chance Donald Trump doesn't make the election. So the mainstream media for the last 6 months, 9 months have been talking Biden versus Trump. It might be neither. I would argue it's actually fairly likely to be neither. So let's see what happens next.
I think Trump is definitely going to remain in the race. I think you're wrong on that, but we've taken a bet and we'll see how that bet goes. And I hope I lose. I hope I lose that bet, but we'll see how it goes.
Now I'm thinking of quadrupling that.
Let's quadruple it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Mama needs a new bathroom, okay?
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. No one goads me better than Anna on these bets, okay?
That's $800, Cenk.
No. So it's right now, it's $200 or nothing, okay? Because you won the $100 because it didn't happen by the midterms, okay? Then, so it went to $200 or nothing, so that's double or nothing. So we go to $400 or I win $200. You see what I'm saying? Because that way I get to win.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
Now all of a sudden she's thinking about it.
No, I'm not. I want to win $800.
Well, that would have to be 8.
There's the trade war, so inflation with materials.
Okay, I hear you. All right, so 400 you win, 200 I win if Trump is not in the race.
Correct.
Right, like does not finish his term.
Correct.
Does not finish his term.
All right, let's do it. Deal.
All right, here we go. We're on again.
All right.
Wait till you see the rest of the show. I don't know what happened there. Okay, wait till you see the end of the show. Because there's a lot of news out that he ain't gonna make it. But okay, all right, God bless, let's go forward.
All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we have Bernie Sanders, man. This is one of my favorite stories. He's showing up to Kentucky. He is calling out Mitch McConnell, smacking him in the face politically. This
not
is
a big news though.
I love it. We'll be right back.
Not a big news story though, no, not a big deal. Okay, we'll do it when we come back. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. This is a portion of the show we do together. So Tracy writes in, Anna and Cuomo, get it, girl.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I just got word that I'll be on with Anna Navarro. She'll be representing the moderates in the discussion.
And that's so fitting.
A Republican, but anyway, okay.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's right. If you want to vote for a Republican, you support the people Anna Navarro supports.
Yeah.
And if you want to vote for a Democrat, support the people Anna supports.
Yeah.
So that's tonight at 9 o'clock on CNN. Don't miss that. That ought to be fun. Anna brings it. Okay, Tommy Too Strong writes in, progressives are pulling ahead versus everybody. There ought to be a t-shirt. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Tommy, because there is a t-shirt. Of course he knows that. TYT.com, I'm sorry, shop TYT.com. And actually it fits in perfectly because it got 20% off today, presumably because of back to school or something.
It's one day only.
It's one day only, so you do have to panic, and you got these snapbacks now. So they're pretty cool and badass and all that stuff, so go for it. So 20% off at shoptyt.com. Tommy, seriously, thank you for mentioning that. Like when I wear my Progressives versus Everybody shirt, people are like, yes. Okay, anyway, KT Nicole 87 says, today was my last day of college, had to share with my TYT family. Well, thank you, and thank you for watching with us. Kabitch on Twitter says, after Mrs. Biden spoke, I think that broke the camel's back. She just couldn't sell her own husband with any authority. Poll taken actually before that. So upcoming polls might be worse for Biden. The Vermont gaffe after the poll. The Jill Biden after the poll. Bernie's Green New Deal proposal after the poll. So upcoming polls could conceivably be significantly better for the progressives. All right, and the last one is on YouTube Super Chat. Cardinal Sin says, impeach now. Democrats will look good for a change. Yeah, it would be wonderful if they fought.
All right, and then I just want to remind you all, on Friday, our power panel will be available to our members as always, but we're doing something a little different. If you'd like to watch, you can watch, and you're not a member, you can watch through Zumo. Just go to zumo.com/TYT, and you can experience the main show on that platform. And if you're interested in becoming a member, it's very easy to do so. Just go to tyt.com/join. All right. Ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do some more news.
I say here in Kentucky to Senator McConnell, stop blocking legislation from coming to the floor of the Senate.
That's Bernie Sanders calling out Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who has blocked votes that would increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. Sanders is also calling him out for his unwillingness to help struggling coal workers in the state of Kentucky, many of whom are struggling with finding work and, more importantly, getting paid what they deserve for the work that they've already done. Here's Sanders calling him out.
Now, if you want to, Senator McConnell, you can vote against that legislation. But we live in a democracy. The Senate is entitled to a debate, and the American people are entitled to know how you vote. Stop your cowardice. Have the guts to debate the issues.
I love watching Senator Sanders attack like this, and I think it's important for him to do it because fighting really does get people to discuss what the reality is among politicians and how someone like Mitch McConnell doesn't care about anyone, doesn't care about doing the right thing, and is actually incredibly undemocratic because he does block votes on the Senate floor. And the federal minimum wage is just the latest example of that. So I love that Sanders is calling him out.
So what winds up happening is that it attracts media attention when there is a fight between personalities, because the media is adverse to covering issues. But when there's a cat fight, they're like, ooh, okay, we can frame it as this person versus that person, and we can say, hey, we're neutral to it, but we're just giving you the fight, and they love the fights, right? So then once you have the fight, you're on your moral high ground because you're saying the reality. Mitch McConnell, you got coal miners in Kentucky who got ripped off. Their last paycheck didn't even get paid to them. They've been out there for 3 weeks blocking this railroad, right? Are you gonna fight for them? You're their senator. Oh, you haven't done anything for them. Why? Because you actually represent corporate interests that are against them. So just own up to it. There's a fight with AT&T in Kentucky. Which side are you on? As always, McConnell's on the side of the billionaires and corporations. And then on the $15 minimum wage. Like if you let him get away with it, he'll bury it and the media will never talk about it again. We'll never have that vote. But I know this is a revolutionary thought for other Democrats in the country, but it turns out you could actually fight back. You could actually talk and call him a coward and say, hey, you know what? He's not allowing a vote. And what is McConnell gonna do? He's gonna say, well, no, $15 minimum wage is bad. Higher wages for people in Kentucky is bad because it would hurt my corporate donors. He'll couch it in terms of like, oh, it could hurt the economy, which would eventually hurt you. But I really, really don't want you to have higher wages.
Right.
Awesome, thank you very much. That's why you start that fight. That's why we want aggressive progressives.
Exactly. I love that you just said that because a recent poll, actually a poll released today from Monmouth, shows that both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are tied at 20% in that poll, and they're above Biden at 19%. I bring that up because this is the way Democrats win. They differentiate themselves as fighters and individuals who care about the average American worker, and they juxtapose their policy proposals to that of Republicans. Whereas moderate Democrats think, oh, let me just try to be a lighter version of the Republican that I'm fighting against. Well, people aren't gonna vote for you because they already have the Republican. They're not looking for Republican light, they're looking for someone who might be willing to actually fight for them. And Bernie Sanders shows over and over again he's willing to do that. Now, following the rally, he put out a series of tweets that I wanna share with you. He says over 500,000 workers in Kentucky make less than $15 an hour. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, why don't they deserve an average raise of $4,300 a year? Stop blocking legislation to raise the current starvation minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour. By the way, real quick, I do want to give Rashida Tlaib a lot of credit because she's saying, yeah, $15 an hour, it's a good start. There's no reason why workers shouldn't get paid at least $20 an hour. So she's a fighter and I love it.
Mitch, you don't want to vote on 15, we can make it 20, right? We could have that conversation. And $4,300 extra for 500,000 people living in Kentucky. That ain't no joke. And what will Mitch McConnell do? He'll hide behind small businesses, ain't got nothing to do with it. It's the giant businesses that are funding him. But okay, then let's take the one more issue here. So coal miners with black lung disease went up to Washington and saying, hey, is anybody gonna pay for our health care? We're literally dying because you told us to go work in the coal mines and that you were gonna have our back. Now, Mitch McConnell actually doesn't care about coal workers at all, not even 1%. So he's like, no, I'm not gonna take care of you at all. You're gonna sit there and die while I take money from the corporations that made that happen. So let's put it out there. Let's emphasize it because they pretend that they care about the coal companies because they ultimately care about the coal workers. But now it's been proven to be a lie. You got black lung disease, Mitch McConnell doesn't give a damn about you. You wanna get higher wages? Mitch McConnell's gonna block it and end it and stop it because he doesn't care about the coal workers. He cares about the coal companies that fund his campaigns. He is the heart of darkness on corruption. So it's a way past time that somebody started fighting back. And if it takes Bernie Sanders going down to Kentucky to kick his ass, I'll take it. And this is what energizes progressives and leads to electoral victories. That's the only way you're gonna beat McConnell in Kentucky. You're not gonna do it by being soft.
Absolutely. All right, switching gears to some other news today. Over the weekend, the New York Times published a lengthy piece about conservative operatives who are looking to find opposition research on journalists who publish negative stories about Donald Trump. And the reason why they're doing this is to discredit them and also intimidate them to prevent future negative stories on Trump. Now, I think Trump does a pretty decent job putting himself out there in a negative light as it is, but let me give you the details on what the Times found. Operatives have closely examined more than a decade's worth of public posts and statements by journalists. Only a fraction of what the network claims to have uncovered has been made public, with more to be disclosed as the 2020 election heats up. Now, they targeted 2 individuals already, one of whom's already been fired. It was a 25-year-old photojournalist at CNN who had put out some questionable tweets when he was about 15, 16 years old. So good job, way to get him. The photojournalist, by the way, didn't publish any negative stories on Donald Trump. In fact, this loose network of conservatives are targeting anyone who works at any news organization that has ever published anything negative on Donald Trump. The research is said to extend to members of journalists' families who are active in politics, as well as liberal activists and other political opponents of the president. And it's targeting not only high-profile journalists who challenge the administration, but also anyone who works for any news organization that members of the network see as hostile to Trump, no matter how tangential. Tangential. Okay, sorry about that. No matter how tangential the job may be to the coverage of his presidency, and it is being used explicitly as retribution for coverage. So there are more details, but this is purposely done to intimidate journalists from doing their jobs, period.
Yeah, so first of all, the stories are negative because they quote Donald Trump. And so it's not like it's op-eds attacking Donald Trump. Although I'm sure that some of those organizations certainly have had that. But no, they're like, don't quote Donald Trump because otherwise people realize he's an idiot. So any story that they perceive to be negative about Trump is usually just giving you whatever Trump said or did, which is borders on insanity and oftentimes crosses that border. So, and this isn't, they always paint this as unusual, and I get it. For a president, it's unusual, but actually the right wing has been doing this for a long time. Roger Ailes did it at Fox News. He had a binder on executives and hosts on other channels that were competitive with Fox News. When I was a host on MSNBC, the PR department told me about that and said, be careful, because I had done an article attacking Fox News. And they said, you shouldn't do that. I said, we're at MSNBC, we're competing with Fox News. They're like, they'll have a folder on you and attack you personally. So the Republicans have been the bad guys on this forever. Ironically, it's the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN that won't tell you that. They'll say, well, both sides do it. What both sides? Where's the left wing's folders and attacks against people's families? And so ironically, these are the organizations that do political correctness with false equivalencies, but it's never good enough for the right wing. They attack them anyway. The only upside to this story is that finally, since it has affected the powerful, they're paying attention. Because this has been happening online to folks who are the tip of the spear. So they've attacked the Young Turks, these same set of guys, the same right wing, the same tactics have attacked the Young Turks, Sam Cedar. I mean, you name a progressive host online, we've already gotten this 10 times over, 100 times over, because they know we influence people, and especially the younger generation, way more than anybody else does, so they attack us first. But when we're attacked, the rest of the establishment media is like, oh, well, I do declare. Yeah, perhaps not, right?
Yeah.
Both sides do it, false equivalency.
No, I mean, the establishment media will publish the same attacks. I mean, there's no question about it.
Without ever noting, hey, these are hatchet jobs. These are coming from a illegitimate source. And hey, maybe I should be careful about that James O'Keefe video. Maybe he might have edited it like he did 12 other times,
right,
etc. But now that it touches them, all of a sudden the New York Times is like, whoa, hey, what's going on, right? Yeah, I know, this is the same thing we've been telling you for at least 5 years.
Well, okay, so there are two things I want to point out. First off, the right wing is unfortunately a well-oiled machine, starting with the executive branch and the Trump administration, going down the pipeline to the most questionable publications, including Breitbart. So one of the examples that the Times noted was when there was a piece published on Stephanie Grisham, right? So she is in the communications team for Donald Trump. She's worked for Melania Trump for a long time. Apparently the Times put out an article that did not shine a positive light on her work history. And so the central player in this loose collective of conservatives is a man by the name of Arthur Schwartz, and he is Don Jr.'s good friend. And so he spends all his time digging up all this Oppo research, including social media posts dating back a decade ago, and then he'll feed it, he'll tweet it, of course, and then he'll feed it to publications like Breitbart. So let's go to that graphic. The New York Times published a profile on White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham, which included unflattering details about her employment history. Then, in retaliation, Breitbart News published an article that documented anti-Semitic and racist tweets written a decade ago by Tom Wright Piersanti, who was in college at the time and has since become an editor at the Times political desk, right? So then that story by Breitbart gets retweeted by members of Trump's administration and his friends, and then it starts building momentum. And then what does the Times do? They freak out and they start investigating. They haven't fired him yet, but were his tweets or his social media posts put in context? Are you automatically gonna concede to the right wing and the hatchet job that they're doing? Like, my point is, they have a well-oiled machine, they have a strategy, and it's important for media to not fall for their games, right? Not fall for their pressure, and they do time and time again. CNN fired a 25-year-old photojournalist over a story that he didn't even publish himself. It's disgusting.
Well, they're talking about his tweets when he was 15 years old. So let me get this right. Republicans say if you attempted rape in high school, as Kavanaugh was charged with, it's totally irrelevant. But if you tweeted the wrong thing in high school, you should be fired immediately. Really? That's your standard? You don't believe that. You're just playing games. And you're playing, I get it, you're playing political games, at least we understand it. But the New York Times is like genuinely shocked and chagrined, like, oh, turns out there might be some bad actors on that side. Well, Sherlock, I'm glad you finally figured it out. I'm glad you guys are journalists. But I think they're genuinely like, oh my God, bad actors. No, everybody has good intent and both sides do it. Anyway, look, when you look at the things that the other guy that they targeted went after, he said, look, I was joking around with my friends, and I don't know what the racial and religious composition of his friends are, and he probably doesn't want to get them in trouble, and etc. But you got to look at that context. You can't just be like, some wrong word was said. If he actually meant it, that's a different story. And how old was he? Was he a journalist at the time? Those are all relevant. But if you look back and go, hey, he might have said something in joking to a Jewish friend that sounded anti-Semitic, removed from that context, and then you fire him over that because the right wing wants you to, well, then you're an idiot, okay? And you're weak, and those fascists will steamroll you while you're playing patty cakes. It looks like, look, don't get me wrong, this is a positive development, because it looks like for the first time the mainstream media is going, oh, this is kind of unfair. I see what they're doing. To which, of course, I reply, of course. They've just been doing it. They've been doing it to everybody but you until now. So now that it touches you, you're like, okay, oh wow, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. Of course you should. And last thing on this, guys, look, there's different levels of terrorism that the right wing does. Whenever there's something they don't agree with, they issue death threats nonstop. I don't mean Schwartz or Trump, etc. Although Trump threatens violence, encourages violence regularly. No, they just release it to the crazy people that follow them. And it's called stochastic terrorism. And so part of that is they target your family. And it might not be death threats, it might be different tricks. I don't want to get into all the tricks, okay, but we've seen them all. They target where you work. They target you personally. Then they target you physically, and then they send the death threats. And so you have no idea the pressure that builds. So random people working at those organizations, maybe you're an accountant at the New York Times, and now you realize, oh, and this has been happening for a long time. Wait, am I gonna keep working at the New York Times when they're threatening everybody in the building? And they have a great number of madmen on their side that actually have sent pipe bombs, that actually have done mass shootings, etc. And they keep encouraging them. And you know what it does? After a while, it works, and it gets the accountant to be nervous and leave the New York Times. And then more, and then more, and then the terrorists win. And so this is how the right wing is trying to terrorize us all. And it's a tough situation to be put in. The correct response is for all of us to stand up together and end the false equivalencies and end the out of context character assassinations and say, we're not gonna listen to you. I don't care what you found from a 15-year-old and what he said a decade ago or 2 decades ago. You're a hatchet man and you're a joke, and we're gonna do real news. But that requires courage. So they've got to have the courage to stand up and say, yes, one side definitely does it more, and we're gonna stop feeding the trolls, and we're gonna end this nonsense.
When we come back from the break, we are gonna talk about the G7 summit. And as you can imagine, Donald Trump just displayed his lunacy for the entire world.
Tick, 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 tick.